If the separation of church and state isn't exactly written in the U.S. Constitution, it is in Idaho's, and some lawmakers are trying to distance us from it. The resolution to remove the Blaine Amendment was brought up once again at the State House. And on the same day, a push to be able to use public money for private schools. That was also brought back. The education savings accounts didn't pass last session, but maybe a tax credit might this one. Russia's war in Ukraine continues, but that hasn't stopped the owner of Boise's only Russian restaurant from turning to some familiar faces for help. We got an update for you on a bill we talked about already this session. We have more authority and power for the state's highest attorney. It's halfway to becoming law now. House Bill 390 passed the House today with overwhelming majority party support. Bill sponsor Bruce Skog, that's Representative Bruce Skog, pitched this bill as a common sense solution to a potential conflict of interest. City and county officials are often friends, and therefore the latter shouldn't be investigating the former as it stands now. The AG, as it currently stands, can only go as far down as county investigations, not city. Letting the AG investigate city officials clears up that concern of, well, conflict of interest, but the Democrats on the House floor still held a bit of a pause about it.
It runs the risk of being used for political motives instead of pure ones, and I just don't see a compelling need to expand the powers of one individual in this nature at this time.
Currently, if there is a need for a city investigation, would they have the ability to ask someone else to do it, such as the Attorney General?
Yes, the prosecutor can locally conflict that out, but my concern is that people won't even come forward to the prosecutor because of the inner working relationships between the city officials and the county prosecutor in each county.
Well, after a 54-15 vote in the House, it is now sent over to the Senate. Idaho State Police had a high-speed chase with a man this morning reaching speeds of more than 100 miles an hour. He is now in the hospital with injuries, but we have more details on that and other stories you need to know around the 208 in today's 411 with Morgan Romero.
Just after 7 this morning, Idaho State Police says they received a call from a gas station in Mountain Home about a suspicious person. When they got there, they say the man drove off and got onto the freeway heading west. Troopers chased the man, reaching over 100 miles an hour. The 30-year-old man with a dog in his car drove off an exit into a way station that was under construction and drove into a hole. He's now in a hospital. The dog is okay. ISP says he currently has multiple warrants out of Ada County. Valley County Sheriff's deputies found a 65-year-old man shot yesterday around 1 o'clock in the afternoon outside a home on Loomis Lane. That man later died at the scene. The sheriff's office says the victim and the suspect, later identified as a 48-year-old man, did know each other. The suspect was booked into the Valley County Jail and charged with first-degree murder. He's scheduled to be arraigned today. The Union Block building has been closed in downtown Boise for almost 4 months. This after the city vacated the building because of safety concerns. The owner of the building appealed the closure, and that appeal is scheduled for 6 p.m. tonight at a City of Boise council meeting. The hearing is open to the public. Make sure to tune into the news at 10 to hear what happened. And that's your 411 on the 208. I'm Morgan Romero.
Food brings people together, and at Alyonka, that couldn't be more true. Despite the current events, Russian Restaurant's kitchen works harmoniously with its Ukrainian sous chefs. All right, it's that time of the show. We want to know what you think of the show. Text us at 208-321-5614. Always include your name and the hashtag the 208. And always be clean, concise, and clever. That gives you a better shot of seeing your text at the end of the show. The separation of church and state. You've probably heard this term being thrown around a lot. It's more of an idea, though, in our country, rather than an actual law across the land. It is, though, in many states. It's a law regulating our schools. It's often called a Blaine Amendment, named after former Congressman James Blaine. We have one here in Idaho. It's in our Constitution, which means the state cannot and will not fund religious schools with public money. But a new push to the State House wants to repeal that language with a constitutional amendment. The resolution currently held in committee because, as our Andrew Bartline learned, there's a lot of unanswered questions along with it.
It's been part of the state since its creation in 1890.
Which is called the Blaine Amendment.
A clear line drawn between Idaho schools, the public and secular, the private and religious.
This resolution is just trying to get this discriminatory language out of our Constitution.
Joint House Resolution 1 proposes a constitutional amendment to repeal Blaine.
Rooted in bigotry and discrimination.
Because as it currently stands, religious schools can't even get a dime of public tax dollars.
Yes.
Representative John Gainon's concerns want to keep it that way.
I don't think we got a lot of answers specifically on those.
Including
questions for Representative Price.
What it would cost the public school system's bottom line.
If there's any kind of estimate out there.
What you're concerned about is not what this joint resolution is dealing with.
But it lays the foundation for a secondary action that's already making rounds in the legislative wings.
Repealing this constitutional clause would provide an easy path for the passage of ESA, school voucher, or tuition tax credit legislation.
Public dollars and private schools. If that's what a supermajority of lawmakers and a simple majority of voters want to happen.
We are a people that are under God. Our Pledge of Allegiance identifies such as well. And so we are a religious people. There is actually no such thing as an irreligious people.
But there's no clear lines.
We'll give you 2 minutes today for public testimony.
On what exactly a religion is.
Hello, my name is Rowan Astra. I represent Satanic Idaho.
Hail Lilith! Hail Satan!
I look forward to the opportunity to be able to start a satanic K through 12 performing arts school and being able to have access to the same funds that any other religious school would have.
Would that result in equal distribution of public funds to Satanists and other what we might call fringe religious beliefs or organizations?
Just to be careful, let's not label any one religion fringe or not
fringe. Or not fringe.
Because
we're not going to label things
whatever
fringe.
your particular flavor of religion is, someone might think it's fringe.
This is the point, I think, Mr. Chair.
A problem promoted on both sides of the aisle before unweaving language sewn in state fabric.
We could end up being forced to support institutions, educational institutions that people would not be comfortable supporting at all.
That resolution is currently held in committee. We will see it again when or if Chairman Crane decides it's time to revisit this resolution. And to be clear, amending the Constitution needs 2/3 of lawmakers, both in the House and the Senate, to support it. Then it would go on a ballot where a simple majority of voters would be needed to approve that as well. The questions, Brian, were mostly brought up by Representative Gannon, who was highly skeptical of this, hence why we talked to him afterward about what is the financial impact going to be? Is this broader than just schools? What about like the property these churches have? Or are they still going to be tax exempt if they're then receiving tax dollars back? Things like that, questioning the unintended consequences.
Yeah, there's no irreligious people. Is that what the quote that from that story that?
Yeah, I believe that man represents a church out in Middleton, if I'm remembering correctly. But yes, that is what he said.
Isn't that the definition of atheism? To not believe in any god or gods?
I'm not an expert on it.
I know.
But the Church of Satan talking after him, I thought was a little ironic.
Yeah, and that's kind of what that was going. And to your point of, okay, so where does that mean that a church or a religious school, where do they stand when it comes to tax revenues? Well, that was addressed a little later on today.
What this legislation does, RS 3015, the Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit Bill, I know many of you have heard many things.
Well, we've heard several things, sure, but today would be the first time we've seen this proposal. And as Senator Lori Den Hartog from Meridian explained it, here is what the legislature's latest attempt at the state tax dollars paying for the option of a private school education, something that hasn't, or isn't, I should say, been happening in Idaho at this time. Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit Bill, House Bill 447. It's mostly what it sounds like. The bill's intent, as written, is to let parents and legal guardians be able to choose educational services that meet the needs of their individual children. It would allow parents to claim a tax credit up to $5,000 per student or $7,500 for kids with special needs, meaning any money they spend on any such education, which includes textbooks, transportation, including mileage, testing, tutoring, even tuition for a private school, a religious private school, any private school, they can get that money back when they file their taxes. And they plan to put a limit on that tax credit at $40 million on a first file, first credited basis. Okay, so what about the lower income families who don't really have the money up front to spend now and can't afford to wait for that tax credit? Well, House Bill 447 would also create a $10 million grant fund so parents can apply to get that money up front. The money to pay for that would come from legislative appropriations, the bill says, transfers, or even donations to the fund. But as you can imagine, there's likely to be a hit on Idaho's overall revenue, as explained by Senator Den Hartog.
The way a tax credit works is it reduces the revenue number on the bottom line to the state. So depending on how it affects an individual or a household's income tax filing, it either reduces their tax liability, which would reduce the amount of money being collected by the state, or if their tax liability is such that it is less than the amount of the refundable tax credit that they would be eligible for, the state would issue a refund, and that would come out of the general fund, which is a combination of sales tax and income tax.
So yeah, kind of like a hit of general or to the general fund of up to about $50 million a year, which is kind of how this bill is laid out. The other cost of this bill would be to cover 2 Idaho State Tax Commission employees to administer and oversee this program, just 2 employees. The State Tax Commission would also be responsible for auditing any receipts and invoices filed with this tax credit. Now, granted, this is just the introduction of the bill today. There wasn't any public testimony, so there's sure to be questions and hopefully some answers that come with that. But the bill itself, it does try to specify what is considered academic instruction. For example, it says that it has to include language arts, mathematics, science, social studies. Those have to be included. And those classes, though, they can be in person, they can be online, they can be virtually, or any combination of those. It could be a micro school, a learning pod in your neighborhood, just as long as those pods or those micro schools are taught by a certified teacher. I couldn't find anywhere in the bill that it specified that students who are homeschooled are included in this. Of course, unless that parent falls under the certified teacher category, then I guess that could be your own little micropod in your house. The bill does say any private school, by accepting students whose families using the tax credit or the grant money, does not become subject to oversight from the state. They don't have to change anything about what they believe, about what they teach, or who they allow to attend their school. The question many of you may have is, would $40 million be enough to cover this? Well, they said they would reassess in 2026 to decide that. House Bill 447 is now awaiting a public hearing in the House Taxation and Revenue Committee.
Oh my, do I have something to tell you today. The high temperature, do you see it? 61 degrees, the high temperature for Boise. Nobody else hit that number, but Twin Falls was up to 53. You see, Boise was 61 degrees for the high. How does that compare? Well, if you want to talk about broken records, we have one. For today, the high temperature was 61 degrees. The previous record was 59, which is back in 2018. So we did it. We have a new record for today, and there's a pretty good possibility we could see it for tomorrow. Not so much for Thursday and Friday, but I put the records together for us. You can see 63 degrees is the forecast high for tomorrow. Pretty confident in that after the 61 for today. Tomorrow's record is 61, so that will break that record likely. So we had one yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And the 63 degrees would also tie the all-time record for January, which was taking place on the 9th of January. And that's 63 degrees. We've never been warmer than that. Now, when you look at Thursday, the high for Thursday is 56, and the high for Friday is 46. The records are well above those two dates, that's for sure. So the next 7 days, you can see here for Wednesday that tomorrow we still have a little sunshine that's left in this thing, and the temperature will get up to 63. You know, maybe some spots could get a degree or so even above that. This has been amazing weather, amazing high temperatures, but then the change comes into the picture. And the only thing that's really good about this when you look at the storm systems and these temperatures coming down is you have to think about the mountains, because their temperatures are in the mid to the upper 30s when we have these 40s, and their lows at night can drop into the 20s, which means that it helps to maintain some of the mountain snow instead of melting so early. So as you look at this, we've got the rain showers down here in the valley. Temperatures are coming down, a little bit more typical, but still above average. If you look at some of these temperatures, they're rather nice, as high temperatures could still be in the 40s, around 50 degrees.
There are two generations of Americans just walking around who have no idea what the world was like with the Soviet Union. But there's a first-generation American here in Boise from Russia who remembers it well. And with the recent attempt by Russian President Vladimir Putin to reclaim parts of that empire, well, she knows firsthand why it's important to not just remember your roots, but to remember the crimes or misdeeds of history or even current events. Well, they can't be carried by current generations. Nowhere is that more evident than in Boise's only Russian restaurant. The building formed by the intersection of State and Lemp looks more triangle than trapezoid, like it's short aside. But there's another side to the Russian restaurant.
Alyonka Russian Cuisine.
You'll find.
Looks like we have a 5:30
inside.
Yes, absolutely.
Kind of like the collectibles from the old country. Squeezed into the cramped kitchen is where you'll find owner and chef Elena DeYoung readying for the evening rush. It's something Elena's been doing since November of 2019, when she started Alyonka, an idea inspired by her success running Boise's Russian Food Festival for more than a decade. But Elena's love of food goes back even further.
Yes, I grew up in Soviet Union.
Born in Kazakhstan's biggest city, Elena knew all about sharing small spaces.
My dad passed away when I was 7, and there were 6 of us. We moved in with our grandparents.
She remembers watching one of her grandmothers cook for the whole family.
And she could make something amazingly delicious out of nothing.
Which was quite the skill, considering they lived in a home without running water and just one hot plate.
When she died, I was 11, and I was responsible for cooking in the house. And since then, I always was looking for something similar, experimenting with different food, you know, cooking and baking and trying to find those flavors.
Elena found some of those flavors.
My mom, I believe it was her wedding gift.
In her original family cookbook.
The book of delicious and healthy food.
And a few have found their way into her current menu.
So when I grew up with different ethnicity. And I would say my menu kind of indicates that. It's not strictly Russian.
And that's the other side to Alyonka's, the side that shows whom Elena welcomes into this space. Her sous chefs, Natalia and Svetlana from Ukraine. I know people would look at that and go, okay, hold on a second, Russia and Ukraine working together.
Brian, I grew up in Soviet Union. We did not have a separation. You're Ukrainian, I'm Russian. I grew up in Kazakhstan. So I grew up in multicultural community, and I thought, who cares what's going on in the world?
Standing shoulder to shoulder with Ukrainians is nothing new for Elena, who hired her first Ukrainian months after she opened.
Hiring Ukrainians like hiring the sisters or brothers. It doesn't matter. We all speak the same language.
That's not to say, nearly 2 years after it started, what's happening in that country goes unspoken.
Well, the girls coming in and they telling me, you know, they have families there, and they telling this horrifying stories what's happening there. It's painful to hear it. I wish I could have a way to stop it or do something about it.
Svetlana's story? Well, she ran her own restaurant in Ukraine, but moved to Boise in June, just after the war started.
Her daughter's husband, her son-in-law, died in the war.
English may still be foreign to her, but Svetlana says she's happy to have found a place so familiar, so far away.
She said, yeah, I feel like I'm home.
Even Elena isn't sure who's helping whom.
It doesn't matter if they're Ukrainian or Russians.
Which is kind of the cornerstone of Alyonka, the side you can't always see.
What separates people is hate. Love brings us all together. And what else but food can bring people together? That's what is important. That's what we do. We spread love through our food.
You might be wondering about the name Alyonka. That was Elena's nickname growing up. Elena said Svetlana and Natalia, who have only been at Alyonka for less than 6 months, as you mentioned, or as we mentioned, they aren't the first Ukrainians to work there. Right after she opened in 2020, she met a young woman at a Russian market here in town, whom she hired on the spot, and then hired her mother 6 months later, so it doesn't really matter. Svetlana told us, through Elena, when she told people back home where she works, she certainly got a reaction. But as she said, working at the restaurant feels like home. 3 weeks from now will mark the 2-year anniversary since Russia escalated the conflict with Ukraine by invading that country. Welcome back. Let's get to these comments that you sent in. A lot of people talking about the potential for school choice tax credits on taxes being passed at the Idaho State House. Let's learn from Arizona, where $65 million of public funds quickly grew into $900 million for private schools. Private means private, says Elaine from Boise, and that is true. In fact, Arizona looks like they're going to have about a $319 million budget shortfall because of that program, which they have to address now. Tax credit bills. Why do the same people who are demanding extra oversight in every public school advocate for public dollars going to a school with no oversight? I think the bottom line is those folks are anxious to kill public schools. That is Maggie in Twin Falls. As a non-religious taxpayer, I do not want my tax dollars being redirected from public to private schools, says Jack in Boise. Why can't some GOP Idaho legislators understand taxpayers don't want to pay for their private or religious schools? Idaho is not a theocracy, it is a democracy, says Steve. Why should church schools receive tax dollars unless they pay taxes to the state? Which is kind of the question we addressed, which is kind of the question a lot of you have, and we're seeing that come up now. Someone wants to start a satanic school in Idaho? No, go back where you came from and do it. Idahoans don't want it here, says Denise. But if this bill passes, well, then I guess anybody can kind of start their own private school, maybe start their own religion, which has a school attached to it, and then accept students. How about this one? If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. No public funds of any kind to pay for anything but public schools. How come it takes 2/3 majority to take money, but not to give it? I don't get it.